everybody, welcome back to the Bill and Ray Show. I'm back out in the torch shop making another marble today, and today's word is wavy. I'm going to do some electrum, the blue, I think it's called Unobtanium glass. We're going to put a little bit of that in this marble, and we're going to try and make some kind of wavy patterns inside. So, I'll get fired up here and get started. Put my glasses on, that's a good idea. So I've got a 15mm rod here. I'm going to build up a little bit of twisty material with this Neptunium, I guess it is. I said electrum first, but that's the silvery version of the same color from Aura Labs. And this glass can be thinned down a lot and still have color and shimmer. So we're going to put a little bit onto this clear base. And I think to start out, I only just need a little tiny section of this because this is going to get pulled down quite thin. And sometimes it helps to kind of start with a larger scale. And it's going to be just a little round, thin cane. But I think to lay down this glass, I'm going to start out kind of flattening this just a bit. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Okay, I'm going to come in here and just draw one little line of this glass. And we're going to seal that in with some clear, just to kind of add to the thinning out concept. Watering this down. So that's all we really need to do there. So I'm going to handle up on this end. And we're going to go ahead and cut this off. Make it a little bit easier to deal with. With that heavy rod, really, it was just kind of for starting out with some bulk. Get another handle on this. So I hope everybody's doing well out there. We're getting into the middle of December practically, and it's over 50 degrees. We've got part of this atmospheric river is coming through our area. Lots of wind. I think it's calmed down a little bit right now, hopefully. Hopefully that's kind of the end of this phase. We're supposed to get a bunch of rain still. So the idea here is I just wanted a little bit of color. And what's basically going to be a clear stringer. Kind of do this in stages. We'll get this twisted, get the twist started and pull this out a little bit. At this point, we'll go ahead and swap out to a smaller. Some of these pieces, they're kind of long. So these handles now are 5mm, and I want this cane to be even smaller than that. So helps to kind of have a handle that can kind of gauge where you're going with this. Alright, so far so good. This is kind of what I was looking for, just pretty thin piece with a little bit of twisted color in it. Holding on to the ends with the smaller diameter kind of is easier to get a lot of rotation. Alrighty, cut this free. And that's ready to go into our marble base. We gotta do our marble base first. Just clean up a couple pieces here. Put this guy aside, and then we'll get jumping into our larger piece of glass here to build off of. So as I get started with this, cleaning this up, take this opportunity to mention the water filter company that we're affiliated with now, Epicwater filters. There's a link in the description below where you can look at what they offer, different under-the-counter systems and filters for a pitcher system or a water bottle. So we invite you to check out what they offer. They have filters. They have the system and then separate filters that are recyclable. They'll last like 3 months or something. A typical usage, and they make different ones designed kind of for urban city water, or in our case we're on well water. So you've got a filter that's kind of different for different purposes. So if you're interested in maintaining clean water, I invite you to check it out. So just gathering up some glass here, and then I'm going to get the starting cone shape going here in a minute. This, as often as the case, is going to be adding some successive layers to build out the color and pattern on the inside. So it's always kind of a judgment call as to how big the starting point is going to be. That's going to have a big bearing on how the rest of the process, how large the marble winds up being. But there's a couple of different stages I can adjust and manipulate the size of this. So I can go kind of oversize at this stage, and that actually helps start the lens part of the process. And I'm going to take this opportunity to kind of clean up some built up glass skin here. The outer skin of glass rods is always a little different than the interior glass, and they wind up creating some optical little funkiness. So clean some of that up and start focusing on front side here. Switch up here. I'll kind of hang this. Sorry about that. I'm blocking the whole view here. Hang this down and let that cone kind of draw out. Got pretty bunched up and pretty fat. And drawing this, exaggerating how long it is, will help us get more surface to decorate. Okay, wow, hopefully that's not going to be too big to start with, but we'll go with that. And we need to let this settle down for a moment. Flame adjust a little bit. We're going to do a little gold fuming on the tip. Silver fuming kind of more towards the back area. Okay, we'll start with our fancy little stick we made. And try and pick an edge here. So we're going to try and do some wavy lines. Yeah, so like I said, it didn't really need very much of that decorative element, but it's kind of hard to produce super small quantity of stuff, so then you wind up with some leftover. You can do something with that later on another piece. Probably use less than half of it. Okay, that's layer one. And I pulled out some thin clear. So I'm going to do that in my next layer. And kind of repeat that same idea of adding a little bit of gold and then some silver. It's a little hard to see fume on top of fume. It's difficult to determine what you've got on there. So same sort of concept, doing some wiggly wavy line. Trying to keep the angle going so we don't get that fire too much onto the fume. So now the next step, I'm going to do some clear patches on here that will give it some dimensional character. Find my coffee cup. So this is kind of a lot of cycling of getting the heat going. Melt all that in. Get this shaped up and let that heat kind of dissipate just a bit. We're going to kind of build these up. Pretty good glob of glass on here. And then as we melt this in, it disperses a little bit. But this is one of those phases where we're just going to let it melt in, do what it wants to do, and then we'll shape it again for a smooth cone shape. I kind of imagine directing the heat to the thickest part. You obviously don't need as much heat on the tip. You can see it's starting to conform, create its own. Basically, I'm going to just turn this into a round blob, and then we have to get the cone shape going again. So you're building up a lot of heat base into the core, and then you're going to lose that heat. Because when we're shaping it back to the cone, we really want to just affect that surface layer. Well, it'll just be really difficult to control the whole thing if we don't. Don't let it cool off a little bit. Okay, then we start throwing heat back into it. Initially, we'll just kind of press successively on these places where I added the clear. And I don't really want to introduce twisting at this point. So you kind of go back and forth, marving in different directions, right and left. Start kind of sharpening that point without getting it too twisted. Okay, well, don't know what it looks like on the inside. I'm not going to be able to see what's going on the inside for a while. But we're going to move on to kind of sealing the deal. So we've got some blue-green frit to start with. Get the surface good and hot. Drop it into the frit. Give it kind of a bath in the heat far out in the flame. Okay, put that one away. And we're going to use some blue spruce. Much darker color. Kind of the very end sticking out there that we didn't get anything on. In this step you can kind of do some repeat before you even get it all melted in. Once you get all these little specks of glass good and hot, you go back and pick up some more. Yeah, so that's plenty of frit on there. Get this all put together. Reshape a little bit. And now I can go on to some backing. I've got some dark cobalt. So we have a little bit of frit that sticks out above this line. That's what we typically have. That will get pulled out a little bit later. Some of it will kind of condense into that rim. Okay, did some of that wrap with it tight together, and then some of it with the gap. Come back and fill in the gap. So there's all this other prep work that goes on, pulling out these stringers for this step and later on the back side. As much as I try and show kind of the whole process, there's still generally some prep work that I don't bother trying to cover. Try and limit the amount of prep work that I'm trying to show off, because it's pretty basic. Some of this step I kind of squeeze the ends and shorten up that cone a little bit. Before we go into the next phase, I think I'll throw down some silver on the back here. And then, this is kind of a short stick. I'll get some out of it. Well, hopefully we get kind of a blue, oceany tone. Maybe kind of a Caribbean flavored tropical ocean interior. In this phase, we're just starting out bulking up the clear to get our general marble size and shape. This step doesn't have to be pretty, just need to get a lot of glass down. And I always start off, I leave that very end open. If you cover that end with clear, you won't have nearly the depth of the vortex effect that you might otherwise have. You want to try and preserve that focal point out the back side as much as possible. As we come up to this edge, we want to come right up to the edge, but don't go over it. And at this point, we're going to try and kind of scooch some glass on either side here. Plus we can start burning off some fume that spilled over. Okay, so sort of push that edge over. Keep this tip and then push that, kind of roll this back away from that end so we keep that exposed. think that big fat flame would make this process go a lot faster, but it helps keep the base warmer. But this little Lynx torch, it's surprising how fast it can chew up glass. Alrighty. Now I can use a larger fire and melt this in. See if I can juggle rotating with one hand. It's all good except it's too hot right here. These Kevlar sleeves, they do a good job of keeping the heat off. There's a huge difference between your bare skin and having it covered. Okay, get this kind of smoothed out. And then again, I'll let it sit here and rest for a moment, lose some heat. I'm going to start drawing lines on the back side. Okay, so we have some dark green, some Aqua Mist, and Unobtanium. Let's start with Aqua Mist. Start out right along this line, right at the edge of the clear that we put down. And a little bit of color and frit that's sticking out, but don't worry about that right now. So this is the first step where we kind of cover up that point, vortex point at the end. I'm going to come in here with some dark green. Glasstronics. Oopsie. That's the trouble working with little thin stringers. Can't torque on them much. Okay, and last is the Unobtanium. Going to continue our tropical seas colors. A lot of times I do quite a contrasting color scheme on the back side. But this marble is overall more trying to work in the blues end of the spectrum. Okay, I'll call that in. We got some bubbly stuff here and there, but most of those little bubbles will work themselves out. Successive heating will pop some of those. The raking process can pop some of those. So the glass stretches and moves, it break those open. Another step that seems like it takes a long time, and you don't want to rush into the next step too quickly. You want to make sure these lines are really melted in. Okay, back to another pause. Heat them up, cool them down, over and over. Each step, control. Okay, so I got my tungsten pick. My pick is getting a little short. There's a lot of heat coming off of there. Okay, come back to the beginning, make a little wiggle. And head to the very tip. Back up and try and grab a little piece of the swirls above. Come down to the end, and I kind of pause there for a moment at this very end and then pull it out. Try and lose some of this glass at the tip. It's pretty mixed up. Oops, try and do that without it boiling. Keeps wanting to kind of boil off there a little. And then press it in, which may kind of collapse that very tip. But then we'll go into this next zone and we'll push some of that glass back away from that tip. Come back to the beginning, and we did really good on this this raking. We didn't break loose anywhere. I do think there's one bubble. Where'd it go? There it is. There's another pick. Let that heal up before we go into the crazy big heat. It's good and bright, good and hot. Now it's throwing a lot of heat. Use a marble mold to just kind of gently coax, especially that one kind of shoulder that's sticking up. Alright, let it settle down for a minute. Okay, so start forming this lens. I have both my hands full, so try and adjust that torch. Yeah, if you saw that shake in my hand, that was not a design shake. That's just a random shaky arm. And work on that first little valley and get that to go from an innie to an outie. Trying to kind of direct some heat into that circumference. Push that out a little bit. We're not pushing it really or anything, just allowing the weight of the glass at a bit of an angle. Just slump back and start getting that clear glass to sort of push out over the edge. You might have noticed this is a spliced clear rod that I'm working with. In most of these videos I start with the virgin section of rod, but I wind up with all these little short pieces, so I have to stick them together, and when I do that, I don't anneal the rod. I generally have pretty good luck without anything going funky near that connection point. Alright, we're getting close to cutting this loose. Alright, work our way through that cutoff. Now we're going to go around this circumference and peel off some glass and clean up that edge. So you don't really want to throw your tweezers right into the fire, so when I do this pull off, I drop below the flame, come back up to the flame to cut that tail. And if I keep the tweezers in the water, they tend to work a lot better at releasing that hot glass. So this is kind of an extra step. This isn't entirely necessary, but I like to see that edge be fairly clean. And the last grab, we need to avoid boiled glass or whatever, so we try and pull that out farther in the flame when we flame cut it, and then sort of tuck that color backwards into the edge there, and come up to the next zone. And just continue skimming off that outside layer. We'll come back around where we started. And pull that up to the next level, and then we left a mess on there. The tweezers will leave kind of some messy metal. They'll do their own fuming. You get them too much into the fire. You actually watch that surface of the glass. It doesn't really happen until it gets really hot. And then you can actually see. And then it's all clear, but it's sort of like you see some evidence of a different glass or some contaminated glass or whatever you want to look at it. So this is not completely a blind operation of just scraping glass off for the heck of it. Okay, so we got the skimming done, and then there may be other things that introduce some problems. There's a bubble there, I think. As this melts back down and gets rounder, we just keep watching that glass surface, make sure there's no bubbles or scars or black specks or whatever. It looks pretty clean. The only problem with leaving this marble mold here right under the torch is it can get stuff inside there. Frit, I think. Kind of using the deep well of a large marble mold to help bring this together. Okay, we got the front lens shaped up pretty good. It looks kind of large at this stage, and sometimes I pull some glass off of there, but I'll see how this goes. Give it a moment for that new punty to kind of get a little strength. When I do these transfers, I kind of focus the marble on the new punty, and the old punty gets loose. So grab that bit of clear and then some. Okay, start throwing a lot of heat into that colored side. I need a little fast spinning. See if it will help. That thing's getting a little bit hot and wiggly on the punty, so it's hard to spin it fast. So it's kind of interesting to think of all the transformations. You think back to when there's a cone sticking out the end that I was decorating, and at this point it's compressed and flared out. And kind of a funnel. Squeezing it together. tell the whole marble's pretty hot when it gets all wobbly like that. See down inside with the depth of that. Surprising how reluctant it is to get that last little bit of two halves to fully merge and smooth out that surface. And there's no easy way to direct the heat just where you want, because the material needs to move to fill that gap. Okay, pretty much there, so I'll go ahead and spin this up a bit, let it cool down, let that poor marble mold soak up some of that heat. Yeah, I'm going to do a fire on the back side, but this is just really flame polish. You see some carbon specks from the marble mold. They'll burn away. And gets that backside surface really hot. Let it flow, let the flame polish effect clean it up. Now that back is basically done. Now I need to cool it down and not disturb it for our final punty switch. So I think I accomplished a lot of wavy action in there. Okay, heat the marble where you want to attach. Heat the punty. Tag it. And you can kind of pull back a little bit, wiggle it around a little bit. Stress that connection just a bit. Don't bump into things now that you have it on the final putty. You don't want it to fall off. Again, as this gets superheated, you're looking for anything on that surface that looks weird. If it looks weird here, you're going to see it when it's all finished. It'll be subtle, but once you spot it, it's going to drive you nuts. Okay, try and get that clear lens warmed up pretty good. We're going to go into the marble mold from the back side that we know is shaped up properly. Drop it in there, start rotating. Keep rotating the same direction and bring it up vertical, and then we can spin back down the opposite direction. And usually that gets the majority of the shaping finished, and that very front face will be a little concentric wrinkles. So the next time we go into the marble mold, we'll wait for a moment, kind of get our punty on center. Punty is drifting a little bit, which is a good sign. We want that to be a hot enough connection that it stays stable. And then again, like we did on the back side, we kind of spin this up and lose some base heat. Now we just want to hit it with a hot fire, and especially on that very front face. If you can see any wrinkles, try to keep that into the fire until those wrinkles disappear. Then we'll come out, keep rotating, and we'll try and scrutinize our, check our work. Put this up to the light. This is going to screw up my camera focus possibly, but I'll check my reflections. And just for good measure, we'll run it through one more cycle. And sometimes I say this and then, then I see something and think, oh crap, now I've got to do more than one cycle. Get it all hot until our punty is kind of wobbly, and then get out of the fire and just keep rotating. And just let that glass do what it wants to do, and that's to smooth out. Well, of course, it's very different than what I had in my mind, but it's very interesting. It's hard to tell how the colors are going to pop until it goes through the kiln cycle. Okay. Some cool effects, some cool colors. Okay. The freezer's wet. Knock that loose. Gave it quite a lot of heat there to get that to all kind of stitched together into a smooth. Roll it around, look for reflections, and that looks good. Okay, now we just got to give it a moment to cool down before we throw it in the kiln. You don't want to be too hasty tossing it in the kiln. You wind up with more marks in it. That looks pretty cool. Thank you so much, you guys, for hanging out watching these videos. If you've gone through this far, you get a gold star. Alright, in the kiln we go. We'll see what happens tomorrow from my perspective, from your perspective. If you hang on here for just a minute, you'll see this marble in the video in all its glory the day after. So, as always, take care of yourselves, you guys. Take care of your family and friends. We wish you all the very best, and we'll see you on another adventure, another day. Till then.